Guten Morgen, good morning, ladies and gentlemen. I'm going to speak rather quickly, so apologies in advance because I know we have a lot to get through. Conferences like this tend to be, from time to time, given the sector that we're in, a little bit depressing. We're all sort of used to seeing the graph sort of go this way, particularly when we're talking about not just print sales, but also print revenue as well. But I think we're on the eve of something truly extraordinary that's going to reverse the fortunes, particularly of the print business. And I think everyone has been following the newspapers a little bit about the discussions in Brussels and Washington. And the exciting thing for print newspapers is going to be the laptop ban on airlines around the world. So all of our friends at Lufthansa and Japan Airlines and Cathay Pacific, all of those airlines who have taken all of the beautiful newspapers and magazines out of the business class cabins, etc., forcing the digital story. The great thing is that probably by July 1st, I think newspapers are going to be very much back in fashion on aircraft because there'll be no Kindles, there aren't going to be any tablets. So I think if people are looking at their newspaper tonnage, how much they need to be buying for the months ahead, I'm sure there's going to be phone calls from Austrian Airlines, American Airlines. People are going to want to be putting newspapers back on airplanes. And someone was, and it's interesting because a lot of people have been saying, obviously this is related to a terrorism threat from IS. I wouldn't be surprised if this was a story which was engineered by the European Newspaper Congress, potentially, to ensure more sales. Listen, I'm going to talk. I love print. I love paper. I'm not a digital pioneer. I don't believe in being a pioneer. I'm Canadian, and I can tell you, being a pioneer is not a great thing. Because if you go back to Canada in the 1700s, the trailways of people sort of moving west in Canada were littered with dead pioneers. I believe it's sort of the role of small media companies to let the New York Times go first, let the BBC go first, see what works, and then try your own thing. Speaking of Canada, I just want to give a bit of context and color to what we're talking about today. That's me. So I actually started in the newspaper business. That's Winnipeg, Canada, circa maybe 1980. I used to go home to home with my newspaper bag. Winnipeg used to be a two-newspaper city. And after school, I would deliver the evening edition of the newspaper. So have always been a huge fan of print, very much sort of invested in the industry. So much so that also before I was even legal to work in Canada, you had to be 16. I got a job as a 14-year-old working for W.H. Smith. This is when the W.H. Smith empire used to extend to the former colonies of Canada, and used to get paid in magazines. So they weren't allowed to pay you the $3 an hour. But I got paid in magazines every Saturday, every Monday, Tuesday when I would go and work in this facility after school. So always a huge belief, a huge love for journalism. And this took me, and I had sort of an unfortunate experience some years ago. I was working for Börde Verlag, I was working for the BBC, and it was employed in Afghanistan and had the misfortune, this is the streets of Kabul, circa 1994, and had the misfortune of being in an ambush. A bit of a turning point as a journalist, getting shot twice in a war zone, and had the idea that, having sort of come full circle, that I wanted to be in publishing. So I spent some time in hospital. I had to have a bit of a fight with Börde Verlag to try to get some money from them as well. And hopefully this will, here we go. And I sort of considered the state of the newsstand and sort of looked at sort of what was the offer, what was out there, and really sort of saw that a number of things were happening within the marketplace. And it takes us up until about sort of 2005, 2006, and we saw this extraordinary pace of globalization. People moving at an incredible speed, people living lifestyles which were completely transborder, And that sort of gave me the idea, and I'll just sort of jump ahead to this. This is our headquarters in London, a place called Midori House, just in the center of London. And it was the place that gave birth to this project, which is Monocle, a magazine which, for those of you who don't know it, is published 10 times a year. And does a variety of things. So aside from being a print edition, we've just had our 10th anniversary, we have a considerable book business as well as part of our mix, and a large travel guide series that we develop and deliver as well. And then also sort of something, and I said that I wasn't going to talk a lot about sort of the notion of digital, et cetera. But one of the interesting things that we've done as a brand, if you look at our revenue, sort of where sort of our business is really, putting proper revenues at the bottom line, turning us into a profitable business, it is still very much in the world of paper. That edition which comes out every single month. But what we did 5 years ago is we decided to take a bet, and this is the point about pioneers. We said, could we potentially, or should we potentially, invest in doing a tablet edition? And our view was no. We thought, why, as a monthly magazine, go and sort of repurpose everything that you do month in and month out and try to derive extra revenue from that? And sort of the result was that we decided to go the other direction, and we looked at doing podcasts. And 5 years ago, we launched a 24-hour radio station in the form of Monocle 24. So maybe a little bit like Deutschland Kultur, a little bit like a slightly hipper version of the World Service. And that is what we sort of deliver around the clock, and something which is now sort of delivering revenues which are serious, moves to a position of profitability, which we simply couldn't have done if we were doing a standalone tablet edition. Beyond this, we've also moved into cafes. And one thing we sort of found out over a decade is that we really want to be in charge of our own experience and our own retail experience and bringing our readers together. And I'm going to touch upon this a little bit later. Partly because I want to talk about our brand, but I think also sort of 10 fixes that we see for many of the individuals sitting in this room. That's sort of a nice Japanese breakfast that we offer. And beyond that, we've set up a quite significant business in terms of retail. And that's sort of twofold, because on one side, what we wanted to do as a magazine was make sure, like, of course, any editorial operation, we're present around the world. And being present around the world means having editors and having proper bureaus. But as we know, it is very difficult, quite challenging to really be able to afford to have a person in Singapore, a person in Hong Kong, in Tokyo, etc. And what we did is we said, why don't we have retail? Why don't we have a place where our readers can go and engage with our staff every month, but let the retail pay for the journalism? Not in a sleazy way. Retail is something completely separate, but the retail real estate allows us to have a correspondent, at least 2 researchers, now in 6 bureaus around the world, also radio studios for us as well. And we're at the point today where our revenues from retail are approaching 18% of our total turnover. So a very significant and serious part of our business now. And then this is our newest venture, which we've launched in London, very close to Paddington Station, and it's called Kiosk Cafe. And this is, I guess, probably sort of the heart of sort of, maybe a little bit of the thesis for today. I think we all know that the distribution channel is broken. And when you look at all sort of sectors, look at all sectors of retail. I mean, if you look at the coffee business, so whether it's been Einstein Brothers in Germany, following the success of Starbucks, whether you look at, what is the transformation of the apotheke, whether you look at grocery stores, every single part of the retail experience has somehow been reinvented, except when you go to the kiosk. It is still an overlit, over-fixtured, poorly designed experience. And so when we ask ourselves, why does someone not want to engage with magazines? Why does someone not want to engage with newspapers anymore? I believe part of it is because within the entire sort of retail chain and experience, people have an amazing opportunity to go to extraordinary places to consume things. Somehow, whether we look at North America, the big chains are there. Of course, we saw Borders exit the market many years ago. Well, probably Borders deserved to go into receivership and ultimate bankruptcy because it was such a dreadful shopping experience. So what we've tried to do is say, as a publisher, let's try to control the whole experience. And so in this space, we're selling about 400 magazines. What allows us, again, to, let's say, prop up and finance and create an environment that people are able to go and get their copy in London of the Frankfurter Allgemeine Zeitung. Thought you'd like that, Thomas. I think we're selling maybe like 2 copies of the Sonntagszeitung at the weekends. That they're able to go and get, whether it's favorite German titles, whether it is Swedish titles, whether it's magazines from Thailand, we're able to facilitate that and make it happen because, of course, the coffee largely pays for it. Aside from obviously doing our magazines and everything else, and this is, you can see up on the upper left there, a copy of FAQ. We have another business, a small design and branding agency called Wink Creative, based in London, and we've been working with a number of different publishers around the world to, of course, solve issues of redesigning papers, looking at advertising models, etc. And Mr. Lindner from the Frankfurter Allgemeine is going to talk a little bit more in detail. But we were very fortunate, probably about a year and a half ago, that we started having a conversation with the Frankfurter about developing a new title for them, developing something which could maybe step outside of the main paper, looking at something which was going to be able to develop a different revenue stream, bring in a different model. Likewise, we've been working south of the border as well, with the NZZ and working on the Geschichte product with them. And then also something sort of maybe probably some of you are familiar with also Z Magazine, which of course is their luxury title play. So something else where we looked at, again, what should be the advertising model, who should be the people that are coming in, of course, to this on a monthly basis, but of course all of the design, thinking about the editorial makeup and how it's executed. At the same time, this is just a project in Canada, so I'm sure many of you are familiar with Postmedia, Postmedia being one of the biggest players in the country. And like everywhere, they're trying to, of course, flatten out the newsroom, have, of course, fewer international correspondents for a variety of papers, so making sure there's just one person reporting for all of those titles across Canada. So we worked here on something which was an icon that could, of course, work on the masthead of the paper, but also had to be something which, of course, could be a tile for an app. This had to be able to work, of course, dynamically on the website as well. So we created a whole, I guess, a whole circle of families for the Postmedia across Canada. As I said, I wanted to sort of talk about sort of the notion of a modern media brand, etc., but then I didn't pay attention to the program, and I saw that Frau Jäkel from Gunnar also used the word modern in her speech this morning. So I thought I would sort of scrap most of what I was going to talk about and maybe just focus on 10 key points that we think are incredibly important. And these are just observations, but I think a feeling for the marketplace when we're out there. We are an independent media company. We are family financed, though we have a small partnership with the Nikkei from Japan as well. But just sort of 10 things that sort of we think about, I guess, when we look at the marketplace. And I'm just going to put my glasses on here because I can't see. But point one, we don't believe print is dead, but we believe that the challenge for print is that it is presented in environments that people don't want to spend time in. And I think what you do see, and I'm showing you an example, this is Tsutaya in Tokyo. If you look at the Asian market right now, go to Thailand. There's an extraordinary new bookstore, probably the best bookshop and magazine shop and place to buy newspapers that's opened up anywhere in the world. It's in the center of Bangkok, and it's called Open House. Very much inspired, though, by the architects that did this space in Tokyo. And these are just temples to amazing, amazing print. These are environments where people want to linger, they want to spend time, but most importantly, they're able to purchase. And this is where we think about the premium nature of magazines. We think about the premium nature of newspapers. People want to be seen with them. People spend a lot of time thinking about their eyewear, figuring out what sunglasses they should buy, figuring out what handbag they should carry, what luggage should be around the carousel. There's all of these things which define us, all of these visual cues, and yet somehow we forget about the power of the masthead, the power of the front cover, that people want to be seen with your brand. Now, the problem is, and I think this is where many boardrooms forget about it, if you're just carrying around a device from Samsung, if you're only carrying around a device which is made by that company in Cupertino, it says nothing about you intellectually. But yet, if I have a copy of the NZZ under my arm, if I have a copy of the Financial Times, if I'm a reader of Salon magazine, if I'm a reader of Casa Brutus, it says something about me. And that is something, maybe someone's going to come up with an idea. I know there's lots of stands and booths here, but I said if someone was really clever, what they would do is you would actually not just have a screen on one side, you'd have a screen on the other side of your phone as well to say that, yeah, I'm a reader of Der Spiegel. I am a reader of Der Standard. I am a Wall Street Journal reader. Because till now, within a digital environment, I think this is the great opportunity for print, is that we have to treat it as a premium product. And this is something which I don't believe has arrived, or a message that has gotten through to boardrooms, not just on this side of the Atlantic, but many other places as well. So rather than cutting down the size of the paper and making it like a cocktail napkin, or something that you'd find when you get your coffee with Julius Meinl on it, I think it's about improving things. And if that means it comes at a price, but I can tell you we're working on a project right now which involves the feeling and spirit of a newspaper and what excites an advertiser, what excites a big brand. And I'm saying an advertiser, I'm not talking about an agency, but you go and see the marketing director of a big car company and you have a discussion with them. Now, do they want to see their ad for their new off-road four-wheel drive on a device this big? Or do they want to see it with sort of Die Zeit-style real estate? And I can tell you, at the premium end of the market, people still want to invest. But you can't be putting it on inferior quality paper. You need to be delivering an outstanding experience. Obviously, we've been over this, but distribution just needs to improve. And part of that distribution means we need to see better quality retail. And this needs to be a pressure on the part of the publishers to say, if my magazine is going in there, if we're going to sustain this business, if you're still going to be in business, we need to ensure that we have a better league of shops around the world. And it sort of made me think, could we move back to a world where we were post-war, pre-war, which is a place where we have our own dedicated shops and newsstands where newspapers and publishers, because the fashion is, of course, to go out of everything, because the BCG consultants come in, McKinsey says, that's not your core business, don't be in retail, don't do that, sell off everything, and just keep the intellectual property. But if you don't have a supply chain which can support that, I think there's only one other way to go, which is whether it's banding together, like we've seen many people do with advertising, and I'm not convinced that sort of the flat advertising model of everyone selling everyone else's papers works. But I certainly believe something has to happen within the supply chain. And when I think about screens as well, because someone was sort of challenging me the other day saying, oh, why do people want paper? And this was, a smarty pants 23-year-old working for a media company in charge of sort of, enormous budgets. And we brought a number of our readers, our core readers, late 30s, early 40s, just to talk to people from media buying agencies. And they said screens equal work. The association with the screen is whether you're a banker, you're a trader, whatever you're doing, a backlit screen has become ubiquitous. There's nothing premium about it. There's nothing necessarily enjoyable about it. And that sort of prompted me to think about this, that our screens about the morning, when we think about magazine, we think about the world of newspapers and even magazines as well. And this is just a snapshot of, we do a daily bulletin, like so many people do, that comes out first thing. But it sort of made me think that perhaps sort of end of day could be the time for newspapers. That maybe we start to move away from morning editions. If we're still going to have daily papers, if we believe that there's a market, then maybe we need to, maybe we need to be considering this. Because the thing you hear time and time again, of course, from anyone within the business, it's very difficult. It's very expensive. It's very hard to, of course, get our titles to people. Yet Gucci is now saying that they're going to be able to deliver the new season's collection within 90 minutes within 18 key markets around the world. And we know that this is happening everywhere, that there are deliveries happening which do not have to rely on the infrastructure, of course, of major publishers anymore. But you have, of course, your 4 bottles of Weissburgunder being delivered and your fresh rucola, etc. Why can't your paper also come at the same time and have an aggressive level of marketing, which, if I look at all of the major offers in London right now, it's something which is simply not there, but publishers at the same time saying, oh, we can't afford to do this. The infrastructure's there, plenty of companies are making it happen and doing it. Which just takes me to this snapshot about, we all know the importance of weekend, and of course, yes, if there's going to be newspapers remaining, are they only going to be the preserve of a Saturday or a Sunday? I firmly believe it. I think there are a number of things that are happening in the market, not just, I think, on this side of the world, but certainly many other corners as well, which point to, I think, an enormous opportunity. And I just sort of took a picture of snapshot of this newsstand. This is in Lago Trevis in Milan. This is about a passionate person who understands all of their customers, who's offering up a variety of titles from around the world, and I think is in many ways sort of a shining example. This is someone who believes and is invested in the sector, and I can't help but think that there, is potentially room for the Frankfurter. Thomas, you'd probably love to be running a cafe on a Sunday morning as well because you have nothing else to do. That the likes of the NZZ, of course, has tried it, albeit slightly at arm's length at Zurich Airport. But does that have to be the way that things go as well? That you're able to engage with your audience directly. Of course, you're able to push your own brand and supporting brands. And I'm just going to leave you with this point. I feel, because we're sitting and we're standing in the heart of Middle Europa right now, so often we look across maybe the Channel, meaning we look to London, we jump to New York to look for publishing models because we believe that the English language world, and whether it is, of course, all of the major publishers that we know on that side of the Atlantic, have the answer. I think we're at a point, it's very clear, that they have not had the answers. I don't think they have the answers moving forward. I'm always inspired when I come to Austria, when I spend time in Germany, when I spend time in Switzerland. Of course, not everything is perfect. But I think we look at editorial stewardship, we look at innovation, but also not this notion that it's going to be a unilateral world, that everything that is proclaimed in Silicon Valley, everything that we hear from a major company in Seattle is going to be a way forward. And so I hope, sort of looking forward, that we see more extraordinary leadership from European newspapers. Thank you very much. Dankeschön.